There's a big dilemma for people who grew up abused or neglected, and that's whose advice you should take about how to recover from what happened and what it all means. And there are all kinds of opinions out there. People love to give opinions, don't they? You have to do this, you have to never do that. But a lot of the information you get about healing trauma is unfortunately wrong, or wrong for you. So when you seek guidance about how to recover from a terrible childhood, the suggestions that you'll hear contradict each other. This is why it's so important that you seek wise counsel and then use your best judgment to find what works for you. And you know what works because you actually start feeling better and your life starts to improve. That's how you know. But the unreliability of what passes as common knowledge in the trauma field is something I had to learn the hard way. So in hopes that I can help you achieve happiness and healing faster, I want to tell you the 3 worst pieces of advice I ever got for healing the problems in my life that came from my traumatic childhood. The first piece of bad advice I got was when I was 21 years old, first time I ever went to therapy, and I was told that to heal, I needed to confront my mother about all she had put me through as a kid. Now, I had just gone through a painful breakup and was really stressed, and I was working my way through college. And this was back in the 80s where this was the big idea that somehow confronting and expressing your anger at the person who hurt you was going to heal you. So I wanted to tell you about a comment I got that connects to this, and this is somebody whose name is Steven, and he asked my advice via kind of a longish comment under one of my videos. So I'll read you what he wrote, and then I'll talk about what happened when I confronted my mom, and what happened when I followed the other pieces of advice too. 3 things. So here's Steven's comment. He says, I had a golden opportunity in around 1986 to confront both parents together about my mother's emotional and verbal abuse. Now, in my retirement, with a little too much time to ruminate, I keep kicking myself in the butt for not doing it. I met them for dinner one night when they were visiting my brother and me in Hollywood, and we kept everything on a very superficial level. I think my father was just clueless about the abuse. He was not very involved with us kids, he says, but I gave him a pass as he was a World War II medic, a Purple Heart BKA amputee, and I believe he had PTSD. And my mother was her usual humorless, cold, and critical self. I decided not to confront them as my father had had a major heart surgery and was obviously not his usual self. He didn't look good, and my mom had had a stroke in her 50s. I knew it would ruin what was supposed to be a fun trip to LA, and I just could not do it. Okay, I get it. Now I beat myself up for not confronting them, and now they're dead. Guess who's left holding the weight of regret? There's no closure to the abuse. There will never be closure. I know you encourage us to live in the present and stop getting stuck in blame. I do. I am what you would call a privately spiritual Christian, and I know the Bible says to honor your parents. Did I honor them by not bringing the abuse into the open when I had that single opportunity? If so, all I can say is I have paid a dear price and taken myself through a hell of regret and self-bashing for not doing it. I once heard you use the word annihilate. I did not want to annihilate them with this revelation, but I did want to confront my mother with my father present. Did he ever know she said she wished she'd never had children to at least 2 of her 4 sons? Sometimes I wish she hadn't either. I feel like my mother put a sort of curse on me by calling me the black sheep of the family and repeatedly telling me I was born backwards and have been backwards ever since because I was a breech birth. What a thing to say. Now I'm supposed to forgive her while she goes to heaven or wherever dead parents go who abused their kids, and I have to deal with the fallout in the form of bitter regret. I'm trying to let this go and accept it and move on. All right, thank you, Stephen. I'm so sorry this happened to you, and I hear so much pain in this letter where you've described so well the feeling of it being too late to express yourself to your parents and to call out basically a lie, a whole carpet of lies, where nobody admitted what was really going on. And I recognized myself in your letter, and you mentioned going through a kind of hell still to this day, and you're in retirement. And I know that hell very well. So I want to tell you the 3 worst pieces of advice for trauma that I ever got. And I'm telling you this because I want to highlight the ways I think you may have internalized the same ideas. And they are this, that you need to confront your parents to heal, that you need to do this because you need this thing called closure. And the thing that's implied by this is that you'll never heal if the people who hurt you don't get confronted, which, and again, this is implied, there's an idea that it would somehow change your mental state. Now, I know these ideas are common, and a lot of people watching this video may swear up and down this is what helped them, and I respect that. But Stephen, because you're suffering so badly, I want to tell you that I also was told that this was the path to healing, and I also became absolutely miserable and could see no way out. And I want to show you another way. When I was told to confront my mom about what she had done, I genuinely believed that this amazing good thing would come out of it. And what I wanted to tell her had to do with a relative who she was very fond of abusing me when I was a kid, and her like being too out of it to be aware, and also some really painful and dangerous stuff that I was going through and doing when I was a teenager, when basically there were no rules, no involvement from her. And she literally had no idea that I wasn't this perfectly well-behaved, self-sustaining little adult unit who did just fine without any parenting. It was easy for her to think that. You can probably hear it in my voice right now. I still look at her neglect as a terrible thing. So it was common at the time in therapy to put very high hopes on confrontation. And I think my therapist at the time really believed that if I told her all this stuff, that it would be like, I don't know, maybe if the therapist told her parents, she could expect there to be some kind of a meaningful response. And so she thought if I told my mom and let her see my tears and rage about it, that she'd finally understand what she had done and have some kind of remorse or love me or feel sorry or try to do better. I don't even know. I can't even remember what I expected. So on the therapist's advice, I flew to my home state and sat her down to tell her all this stuff she either didn't know or didn't remember and hadn't realized it was bad enough that someone probably should have intervened. And it didn't go well, all right? I think it hurt her and it shocked her, and she probably did feel guilty, and not surprising, I was totally accusing her of screwing up. She was also angry at the relative who abused me, but there wasn't that much logic to her anger or her response to it, except that, well, probably my accusatory tone and yelling in her face about this stuff was really overwhelming her, and she threw me out of the house. And I was eventually allowed to visit, but we never spoke of this again. And I can honestly say I really wish I hadn't done that, hadn't gone and told her about it. Like it just went so badly for me. She wasn't a person who could face reality when the bad stuff happened, and she hadn't later become the person who could do it. And that hurt, that felt really bad. And I guess the best I can say is that it became clear that confronting people who harmed you is not always a great path toward so-called closure. And the wound of what happened to me, in my case, it was made deeper. But let's talk about closure for a minute, okay? In romantic relationships, when people have broken up and then they say they want closure, half the time, what they really want is what? The opposite. They want to reopen the emotional connection and, maybe see if something can happen again. That's my experience. Now, I will grant you, there are situations where some communication is needed to feel done, to stop ruminating about it, and to clarify the reasons around something that had been confusing maybe, or to recover belongings or settle financial entanglements, but be very careful around the expectation of so-called closure. In the case of your parents, Stephen, what might closure have looked like? I think what would have been your best case scenario is that you'd tell your parents sitting together what your mother was really like, and your father would finally pay attention and see what had been going on and finally show up and be the father that you needed at that time to stand up for you and see reality and protect you from this abusive mother. And you'd get to see your mother finally have to answer to what she did and what she got away with, because when you were a kid, you could not make that happen, right? Maybe your dad could. There was no accountability, there were no consequences, there was no remorse. And you deserve to be protected. You did. And this is the horrible thing about abuse and neglect. It is so very wrong to do that to a child. Tell them that they should never have had you. It's so wrong. That happened to me too. And it's hard to understand how your mother could be so callous. And in an ideal world, maybe your dad could have somehow, wrested those answers out of her at that dinner in 1986. Like, what were you thinking? How could you? Can't you see that Stephen was just a kid and you crushed his spirit? Can't you see? And I know you give your dad a pass, but I'll just say, you deserved for him to do it when you were a child, not just her, him too. And you deserved for him to validate that what she did to you was wrong and that his not protecting you was also wrong. But I think, and this is the hard part, that his opportunity to protect the child it's gone. That opportunity doesn't exist. You're not a kid anymore and he's not even here. He's died. You and me, Stephen. And we didn't get that as a child, and no one ever accepted responsibility for that. So many people watching this video had the exact same thing happen to them, and here we are. So this is where I want to talk about the third piece of terrible advice I got, which is basically to accept a viewpoint, and that's the idea that people must have this acknowledgement from their parents in order to heal. Now, Stephen, you tell me you're in hell with this feeling, and I'm so sorry for that. And I wish for you, this is what I wish, is that you get to let go of these toxic ideas that confrontation is essential, that it leads to the concept of closure, and that the lack of this closure defines you in any way. I don't want you to carry that anymore. I invite you to look at these ideas for what they are. They're not true, all right? It would have been nice, but you do not have to have these. And these figures who died so long ago do not hold the key to your healing. They might not have even held it at the time while they lived. When you sat down to that dinner, could they have faced it? You hold the key, all right? I hold the key. To the parents who failed you, we do not accept the fate that you delivered. You don't even know us. We are not defined by what you did. We are powerful. We are real. We can heal. Now, what would have happened if you said this to their face? If it's anything like my family, it would have been diminished, dismissed, mocked, ignored, punished, smirked at, or just shut down. I, for one, am proud of you for using restraint when you met with them. Probably that was in your best interest. What you did there is you were thinking of the big picture in that moment where you could have confronted them, but from what you've described, no validation was ever going to come. Just because you told the truth, what was going to happen? You would have had the experience of expressing yourself, and that might have been nice, and telling the truth. I'm sorry you never got to have that with them, but you have it with us right now. We hear you. We believe you. We understand. You are not alone. And the things I never expressed, it was because I knew too that the price I'd pay is invalidation. And I get it. You didn't want to upset them when they had these medical problems and you were in a restaurant, and you were, that was thoughtful and merciful of you. If you had had that confrontation, when I have had these confrontations with other people over things, you know what? It leads to a whole bunch more upset and dysregulation. Like trying to have that crucial communication with somebody when they can't receive it can be very upsetting. What they did no longer defines you, so you define yourself. Now I'm sending you my love and encouragement to get free of the toxic idea that these people who are dead, left the planet with the only possible healing that you could have. They didn't. You are complete just as you are. Your suffering becomes meaningful and transforms into something good when you can face what happened and rise up anyway to become who you were always meant to be. Only now, right? Only now our suffering is strength. We can be here now for all those who are still going through it. So I invite you, Stephen, to come up and take your place among the healing and healed people who understand. You do understand, and you honor your parents, the part of them before their terrible failings, before they turned bad, the part that was damaged and lost to them by all the crap they went through, whatever it was. You honor them by becoming your full and real self and laying down, shedding that legacy of abuse. Just decide it's not going to continue through you. It's a decision you can make, and nobody can make that decision for you. They can't make it happen for you. If you need guidance on how to do it, that's what I teach, and there are some very gifted therapists who know how to help you too with things like experiential therapy. Patrick Tian has a technique he uses with people to help them complete unfinished business with their parents. It takes a lot of preparation. It's a big thing, but you might want to check that out too. And I hope you'll save all that energy that's been drained from you thinking what you should have done in the past and give it all to making life real and good right now, today, right now. I wouldn't be surprised, Stephen, if they carried in their hearts the shame and the guilt about how they had lived their lives and how they cared for their kids, or didn't really. And I think most abusers know on some level, even though they have to go unconscious every time it comes to their attention, like on some level they know, it's just that they cannot face the horribleness of what they did. They're not strong enough, but we are. I wouldn't be surprised if even though you never confronted them, they know. They know what they did. They just couldn't face it. They couldn't face what they had done, and they were clumsy and emotionally inept. And we see this over and over again. You might regret it, but it says something about your emotional maturity that you refrained from telling them the truth, from saying these things to people who were spiritually, emotionally, and mentally incapable of hearing it. You let them just stay unconscious in their cloud of denial, which is where that was like all they could cope with. So spiritually, that is a kind of justice. That's a purgatory for them. Justice for you is to now rise up and be free. That's your justice. And for anyone who wants support to get free of this kind of pain, here's a video I've got lined up for you, and I will see you very soon.